Now then, as I said, we have been looking at the court system. Now we're going to consider another system which is not strictly a court system, but it's an alternative to a court. So we're going to look now at the tribunal system. So new heading, tribunal system. Now I haven't got my little court structure here, but if you look back on the court structure, you will see at the bottom of that, the bottom of the map, the little outline, that you have provincial administrative tribunals and you have federal, I think, federal administrative tribunals. So the tribunals come at the very, very bottom. They are not technically courts, but they operate in as close a fashion to the courts as possible. So we're going to look at this new system now, which is the tribunal system. Now the tribunal system runs alongside the normal court system. The tribunal system runs alongside the normal court system and acts, ACTS, my accent throws you off, and acts as adjudication bodies. Full stop. It deals with issues of social security, unemployment benefits, industrial injury compensation, transportation appeals, unfair dismissal, and some landlord and tenant disputes. Full stop. It offers a quicker, cheaper, and more informal means of resolving disputes. Full stop. Persons appearing before tribunals can be represented by someone other than lawyers which reduces costs. full stop. Tribunal meetings can be in private unlike open courts. Full stop. So just to repeat, tribunal system runs alongside the normal court system and acts as adjudication bodies. It deals with issues of social security, unemployment benefits, industrial injury compensation, transportation issues or appeals, unfair dismissal, some landlord and tenant disputes. It offers a quicker, cheaper and more informal means of resolving disputes. Persons appearing before tribunals can be represented by someone other than lawyers, which reduces costs. And this is where some paralegals come in, because if they know the system, if they have been trained and experienced to such a level, they're able to actually go to tribunals on behalf of clients. Tribunal meetings can be in private, unlike open courts. So basically, they are not as formal as courts. You don't need to be represented by a lawyer. Having said that, many private individuals will feel pretty daunted by representing themselves in front of a tribunal if they have never gone and done it before. So they may still get a lawyer. But once they've done it once, they probably will be able to do it a second time, because what you are going to the tribunal for should be far less complicated than what you would need to go to the court for. New paragraph. Tribunals do not comprise highly paid judges. Full stop. They consist of a chairperson, who is usually legally qualified and other non-legally qualified personnel with expertise in a particular field such as employment and trades unions. New paragraph. Tribunals are divided into categories So trades unions, tribunals are usually divided into categories, and the first category here is human rights. The Human Rights Tribunal deals with issues concerning human rights such as discrimination, against race, religion, age, gender, pay equality, etc. I guess disability is another one. Actually, funny enough, do you know, I had an application for a worker in the Cayman Islands who is blind. She works for, or worked at the time, for the Cayman Islands police station as a blind officer, but her duty basically involves answering the phones, giving update on reports to people who are phoning in to find out what's happening with their cases and so on and so forth. So a disability really, even being blind these days, doesn't preclude a person from the workplace. Having said that, and in the UK we've had blind ministers of parliament. He walks around with his guide, not guard, probably guard as well, but his guide dog, and he carries out his work pretty much as any other minister does. So disability these days really has come a long way, and some people may feel that they are discriminated against because they are blind or partially hard of hearing and all the rest of it. So this is just another issue that could, rather than going to court, could end up in the tribunal dealing with human rights. So the Human Rights Tribunals deals with issues concerning human rights such as discrimination against race, religion, age, gender, pay equality, disability, and so on, etc. Full stop. Appeals from the Human Rights Tribunal can be heard at a superior court. Full stop. Now, it is not usual that you cross over, that if you want to appeal against a tribunal, you go from a tribunal to a court. It doesn't really happen that way, but it can, and I'll explain to you later on how and why appeals become necessary from tribunals. But appeals from the Human Rights Tribunal can be heard at a superior court. The next category of tribunals is transportation. So transportation. Actually, I should point out that the Cayman Islands lady is able to do her work pretty much because of the computerization within the system. She's really able to do her stuff, answer, read with Braille, and all the systems have been geared up for her. So I was most impressed. She was able to email me absolutely with everything. Really, really impressed. Okay, back to business. Transportation. The Transport Tribunal deals with issues over shipping, road, aviation, or railway licenses. Full stop. The panel comprises a chairperson, and other members with experience in transport, economic business, and commercial expertise. Full stop. All written appeals are sent to the Transportation Appeals Tribunal with copies of any notices from the Ministry of Transport Railway Inspector, etc. Full stop. So basically, again, as you know, any appeals must be in writing and it should be accompanied by the previous notice. Now, when we're talking about transportation licenses, it could be that maybe a railway has been stopped from transporting toxic material. It could be transporting by rail, or even these lorry drivers who transport over long distances certain toxic material and so on and so forth. They could have their licenses revoked if Greenpeace has anything to do with it. And so if they felt aggrieved about these licenses being revoked, then of course they will send a copy of the license to the Transportation Appeals Tribunal, and of course they will then reconsider whether the license should be reinstated. Or it could relate to maybe aircrafts who want to add a particular route to their flight paths and they are precluded from doing so for whatever reason. Again, they can appeal to this Transportation Appeals Tribunals. So you have your Transport Tribunal. It can deal with issues over shipping, it can deal with issues over roads, over aircrafts, and of course railway licenses. Okay, the third is Competition Tribunal. I should try to write more clearly. Competition Tribunal, I'm getting tired now. Competition Tribunal is number 3. Okay, the Competition Tribunal deals with cases of restrictive trade practices misleading advertising, mergers, unfair competition, and abusive market power. Full stop. The tribunal deals with cases referred from the Competitions Bureau which is the first point of call for complaints. Full stop. So what we've seen now is that tribunals run alongside the court system. They are basically adjudication bodies. They deal with issues, as we've just seen, and they are quicker, cheaper and more informal than courts. Persons appearing before tribunals can be represented by someone other than lawyers, which naturally will reduce legal costs. And tribunal meetings can be in private, unlike open courts. We do not have sitting at tribunals highly paid judges. The panel in tribunals will comprise of chairpersons and other legally and non-legally qualified personnel who will naturally have expertise in their particular field. So if we're talking about the human rights tribunals, which deals with issues concerning age discrimination, sex discrimination, religious discrimination and so on and so forth, then you will have someone who actually knows about human rights law, probably being the chairperson, and also someone who may be from an employment background as well, who deals with issues relating to human rights. Appeals from the Human Rights Tribunal can be heard at a superior court. Transportation is the next one, which deals with issues over shipping, road, aviation or railway licenses. Again, you have your chairperson and who is legally experienced, and also you have other members on the panel who are experienced in transport, business and other aspects of the transport industry. We have written appeals going to the Transportation Appeals Tribunals, and of course any such appeals should have copies of previous notices which were received either from the Ministry of Transport or a railway inspector or so on. So you need to show what you are appealing against, the license. The third we have is the Competition Tribunal, and the Competition Tribunal deals with cases of restrictive trade practices. So whether it's unfair competition, they are abusing their market power, it's misleading advertising. That's a very that happens ever so often. You get these advertising which tells you in the beauty industry it reduces your wrinkles, you know, you look 20 years younger and so on and so forth. Somebody from the female or the male population these days could feel that the product they have invested heavily in does not work. Could be unfair advertising or misleading advertising in this case. Or if you have mergers of businesses and the mergers makes it uncompetitive or makes other businesses in the same field uncompetitive. So creating a monopoly situation may not be a good practice for members of the public. So any of these issues relating to trade, to how you carry out your business, can be referred to the Competitions Tribunal. Again, you have your chairperson and you have other members, maybe from an industry of agriculture, or whether it be from you know, some other areas of industry, from advertising background and so on and so forth, to actually see whether advertisings can really be misleading or not. So you normally have your chairperson who is legally qualified, and you will also have other members on the panel who will be experts in the particular field, whether it relates to human rights, transport industry, or to competition within trade practices. Okay, we are going to stop here for today. When we return, we will continue with the tribunal system and we will carry on through Module 1. So I shall say goodbye, farewell, and I shall see you very, very shortly where we continue. Bye for now.